Thanks for staying with us, everyone. This time, we turn our attention to Africa. U.S. President Donald Trump's initiated peace deal between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo has been signed by the leaders of both countries in Washington, even as fighting continues along both sides. President Trump told reporters after the signing with Paul Kagame, the longtime president of Rwanda, and Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi, is a great miracle. Both leaders affirmed commitments to an economic integration compact agreed on last month, and so a U.S. brokered peace deal reached in June. Sitting before a delivering peace backdrop at an Institute for Peace, the African leaders signed and exchanged documents with the U.S. president. As the leaders signed, clashes between Rwanda-backed M23 rebels and the Congolese army were reported throughout the South Kivu province. A spokesperson for M23 accused government troops of bombing several civilian areas. M23 seized the two largest cities in eastern Congo earlier this year, raising fears of a wider war. All right, for a closer look at the relations between Rwanda and DR Congo and the search for lasting peace, a writing fellow of the African Liberty, Agbeyo Burumo, joins me on the news from Rivers State. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So this peace deal is meant to end a 3-decade conflict, but did you get the sense that things were brought to a harmonious conclusion?
Okay, I think it's very beautiful for the optics because we are looking at nations that have been at war for the longest, over 3 decades. And the beautiful thing about this is that the leaders have put their best foot forward to say, okay, it's time to sheath our swords. But I think away from this, the truth must be said and the point must be made, however, that at the end of the day, it's about the people. Now, we are seeing a peace deal, a bilateral agreement, trade agreement between these nations. But where do the people come in? I think that should be the issue for determination at this point, about the people.
So at the moment, there is no ceasefire in place. Fighting were reported even as of yesterday. The M23 rebellion continues to, or rebels rather, continues to expand a stronghold. Are things likely to change on the ground? And with this increased accountability on all sides?
Okay, of course, in the course of the process, we heard from the president of Rwanda, President Paul Kagame, where he said that at the end of the day, it's not about the US. If things go south, that they are to blame. He meant himself and, of course, the president of Congo, President Felix Tshisekedi. But I think they had some level of banters right there. Their true words at themselves in some subtle manner. Because you heard the president of Congo also say that Rwanda has been known to not keep to peace deals. Now we've seen the situation where, of course, Nairobi, the Institute of Peace Nairobi had tried to mediate before now, mediate and broker peace. We've seen Doha, of course, try to broker peace, which of course is still an ongoing process, but all to no avail. So it's a little bit bleak at the moment because the M23, which is a major player, is not in the conversation, is not at the negotiation table. And I think it is integral that the M23 leaders, as it were, should be on the table because the Rwandan government has even divorced itself from playing any role in what the activities of the M23 is.
Now, President Kagame is insisting that the FDLR militia, which is accused of playing a role in a Rwanda genocide, must be disarmed, while DR Congo demands the withdrawal of Rwanda troops from its territory. Rwanda says they have no troops in DR Congo. Let's not forget that several deals going back to the 1990s have collapsed because both sides refuse to honor these conditions. How much of a stumbling block will this pose to current efforts to end the conflict?
I think this is a major stumbling block because, of course, in 2009, when the deal, the March 23rd deal in 2009 fell off, that was what gave rise to the M23 as we have it today, which came to the fore in 2012. So I think until parties become very honest with themselves, peace deals on paper is just to a very large extent a piece of paper, really, until it moves from being just theory to practical. I think this would go on to test the moral weather of both countries and see how they are able to keep to the deal. Because at the end of the day, if they do not stick to what has been signed and agreed upon as the deal, then it's going to be a case of cataclysm, as we have seen in a couple of years back when deals have been signed like this and in this manner, and they did not pull through because these forces kept on perpetuating violence and mayhem.
Whilst this looks like a peace deal on the outside, brokered by the U.S., now called the Washington Accords, really, but for the U.S., this is more of a trade peace deal because it is looking to mine very rare earth minerals from DR Congo, and then also looking at a collaboration at hydroelectric mining between Rwanda and DRC, which it will benefit from. And I'm wondering, would that provide any incentive for some level of implementation and enforcement by the U.S., looking at what it is to gain if there is peace?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think at this point, the US, of course, Donald Trump in his statement said everyone is going to make a lot of money. So I believe the economic implication of this deal, the bilateral, of course, trade agreement, is going to make the US put her foot to the ground and insist that there be peace. But again, it still behoves on the warring groups to sheath their swords. Because at the end of the day, even if the US military comes into the picture or the US tries to maintain peace, if these militia groups refuse peace, then it will be the United States of America versus these militia groups. And then you would see a picture where peace is not still maintained or sustained.
There is a different peace deal being brokered by Qatar between M23 rebels and the DRC authorities. Some people are wondering why there was not an all-encompassing peace deal that the three parties should sign. Do you think that, well, both parties should sign different peace deal, or would you have preferred, or do you think that an all-encompassing peace deal would have, be more, or it would be easier to enforce than having two separate peace deals?
I think an all-encompassing peace deal would be better to sign, but we've heard statements from the president of DR Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, when he said he would not want to have a physical meeting with the M23. And we've also seen and heard from the M23 leaders say that they do not trust the president of DR Congo. And of course, this bickering between both parties is the resultant effect of why it's going to be largely not necessarily impossible, but very difficult to have all three parties together to broker a peace deal.
I want to sort of, look at this more broadly, because at that signing in Washington, we saw some African leaders, presidents of Kenya, and I think the vice president of Uganda and other presidents there. And for a lot of people, it was quite an embarrassment that African leaders would leave Africa and go to Washington to sign a peace accord where that deal could have been brokered by leaders here in Africa.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've seen the president of Angola, President João Lorenzo, of course, under the auspices of the African Union, tried to broker peace in the past, but it did not pull through. Of course, one of the founding fathers of what we now know as, of course, our African consciousness to a very large extent, Julius Nyerere, believes that until Africans come together and Africans stand as guarantors to Africans in trying to broker peace in the continent, it will not exactly work. But we've also heard from the president of Rwanda, President Paul Kagame, where he cautioned the president of South Africa in the attempt to maintain or make room for some sort of a disarmament and ceasefire. He questioned his authority and actually emphasized that he does not see him as somebody who has the credibility, or South Africa as having the credibility to mediate in such disputes. So it's the question of how we as Africans perceive ourselves primarily. I think that's the first issue for determination. And until we have and maintain some sort of mutual respect for ourselves, it's going to be a very big problem, and we may continue experiencing some of these harsh realities that we face in terms of having to go out of the continent to see how we can settle our disputes.
And we see that repeating itself in the efforts to broker peace in Sudan as well, where the only representation from Africa is Egypt. And that's because of perhaps the proximity it shares with this country. And I'm wondering, is this something that African Union should insist on, or is it a failing on their part that they are not involved in peace agreements or peace efforts, even on the continent?
Okay, so to a very large extent, I think the African Union, we cannot exactly totally say that the African Union is not involved in trying to broker peace in the continent. However, it is the manner in which the nations have come to perceive the Union over time, because of the very, for want of better words, selfish interests of some of our leaders in the continent. It becomes very difficult for us to have mutual trust and respect for ourselves. So the African Union, as it were, has lost to a very large extent its credibility. And this is why it's very difficult for its member states or countries to take her seriously. And I think that's part of the issues we are currently experiencing in the continent.
All right, we're following developments on this peace deal and the willingness of all sides to respect it. Thank you so much for your time. Writing fellow of the African Liberty, Agbeyo Burumo.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, that's one now. For more updates on the international stories we're monitoring, you can visit our website at www.tvcnews.tv. You can also follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and on X at TVC News NG. And remember, we also have updates for you on WhatsApp and Telegram at TVC News Nigeria, and on YouTube, we're live at TVC News Nigeria. Thanks.